want to formally welcome everyone to Digital Fridays. This is Adashima Oyo, the HASTAC Scholars Director, and Digital Fridays is an online opportunity for our scholars to present to our community. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael, who's going to introduce himself, and also Elizabeth Waters and Jessica Desamero. Thank you.
All right, great. So hello, everyone. Welcome to our event, Enriching STEM, Creating Equity Within and Beyond the Lab. My name is Michael Epstein. I'm a doctoral candidate in the Behavioral and Cognitive Neuroscience program in psychology here at CUNY. I do research into perception and attention and vision. I'm currently also a graduate fellow with the Futures Initiative. And I'd like to welcome my fellow speakers, Elizabeth Waters, the Acting Director of STEM Outreach at the Cooper Union, and Jessica Desamero, a doctoral student in biochemistry at the Graduate Center. They've joined to discuss these topics of public science and equity. So let's jump right into it. So just to begin, equity in STEM, meaning social justice, equality of opportunity, and attention to diversity, is a critically important issue. In the sciences, especially because we're working to better understand the world and systems within it, a diversity of opinion and viewpoint is absolutely necessary, especially in light of the lack of diversity that can be seen throughout scientific history. So fortunately, this issue is starting to get some increased attention in recent years. The work to improve equity in STEM is a widespread effort. For example, universities are starting to put in better guidelines, more sophisticated guidelines to improve this. And funding agencies such as the National Institutes of Health have some incentives for equity inside of their grant funding models. But there's still a lot to do. And so today, we're excited to focus on a specific part of these efforts, which is the role of public science. So what is public science? Why is it so important right now? Just as a simple definition, public science is making scientific theory and ideas accessible to the public and providing opportunities then for the public to engage and buy into the process. So this is important because the ivory tower stereotype is unfortunately often very true. And as a result, the public sometimes can be very alienated from academic research. And it's important to bridge this divide for a lot of different reasons. For one, to help bolster education across the country more generally, also to help guide public policy. And it's important from the academic point of view to remember that even people without any scientific training both can and should have a basic understanding of scientific and medical thought. And it's important to really continually make an effort to translate our work to make this possible. And I think it might go without saying, but a lot of this has gone, a lot of this is in pretty stark relief right now because of coronavirus, when we can see exactly how important the public's trust in science really is. Oh, can everyone hear me? Yes. We're all searching for answers right now, and unfortunately, from my point of view, too many pseudoscience-y or straight dangerous ideas gain attention. So one of the best things about public science initiatives is the chance to get at this from the ground floor. So this is one of the things that I'm most excited about. A major hurdle for diversity in science is uneven education in this country. So many poor, disadvantaged students aren't able to get as strong of an education. And a great approach is to try and fix these problems with education at this level by building stronger educational opportunities to both get people more excited and more able to approach learning opportunities when they grow older. So in New York, there's a lot of great initiatives that are doing this kind of work. For example, BioBus and the World Science Festival, which do all kinds of innovative scientific outreach. The New York Academy of Sciences has great mentorship programs that they've developed where they pair up and coming scientific researchers with established mentors. And there's a lot of different programs for doing K-12 intervention kinds of things that I think Elizabeth will speak about a little bit, which involves taking students who are training in the graduate level and helping embed them in K-12 settings to sort of improve these scientific education programs. So as far as my own experiences with this, I've worked as a volunteer with BioBus for over the past 5 years. BioBus, for everyone's information, is a program that has basically taken an old retrofitted bus, hollowed it out and filled it with state-of-the-art scientific equipment so that they can make a mobile science lab to use for teaching opportunities. And so a lot of the work I've done with them has been part of something called Brain Awareness Week, which is a program put together by the Society for Neuroscience to make public education programs specifically teaching neuroscience and cognitive science ideas. And so one of the things with BioBus that has been great is they take this bus and they fill it completely with neuroscience and psychology educational stations, and then park it, for example, on the corner of 125th Street in Harlem, and invite people on to experience science in all of these different hands-on and exciting ways. And one of the reasons why I want to bring this up is because aside from helping with this public science sort of putting this stuff out there, it's also helped me develop my own skills that have been applicable to my own career growth. So for example, one of the things that I was able to do with BioBus was help manage one of these events. I grew my own skills developing exercises for education. Like I said, my research is into vision and attention, so I was able to help set up a visual illusion table where people could come in and experience visual illusions and learn about some of the neurological reasons, neurological background that gives rise to this. I helped to have some experience managing a team, recruiting volunteers for this kind of event. And it also helped me develop my own pedagogical and educational skills. I had been teaching an intro class at City College, but it's very different when you're in this setting doing one-on-one teaching experiences with people who you're just trying to get interested off the street. It was very useful for me. And more broadly, it also helped me learn how to situate my own work in the public sphere, getting a better understanding of how the university should be connected to the space that it's in. So hopefully this has given a little framework showing why I think this event is really valuable. Engagement with the public is fortunately becoming more and more a part of academic life, but it's important to continue working to try to motivate this shift. I know as a graduate student, oftentimes it feels like the focus is just on the research, and it's important to remember the broader scope of this and to continually engage with the public also. So I'm going to turn it over to my fellow speakers to talk a little bit about their own experiences now with volunteering and helping organize programs designed to improve public education. And after that, we can open it up for more questions and discussion. So I wanted to say that as we go on, please feel free to type any questions you have into the chat, and we'll keep a list of what people are interested in, and we're very excited to discuss all of these topics later. So I think we'll start with Jessica Desamero. Jessica is a fifth-year graduate student in CUNY's biochemistry PhD program. Her research focuses on special DNA structures called G quadruplexes. And she recently wrote a great piece about her experiences with public science for the member magazine of the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. And I'll turn it over to her now. Thanks.
Hi, so I'm Jessica. So I was going to be talking about my volunteer experience and how it has helped me professionally. So I've been volunteering starting like last year for BioBus at, like Michael said, it was BioBus, and then also World Science Festival. So at first it started out as just something I would try out, but then it turned out to be something that has become integral to my PhD life. So why did I start volunteering in the first place? So I was just, last year I was thinking about I'm going to be graduating in like a year or two, and I haven't done much outside of research. So I was like, I was thinking what maybe I could do. So I was looking up, like one thing was like teaching science to the public. So so I was just Googling things, and then I come up across science outreach. So, and then I looked up science outreach organizations in New York City, and that's how I found out BioBus and World Science Festival, and particularly with BioBus. So my home campus is Brooklyn College, so I saw that one of them, one of the board members was part of BioBus, so that's what I wanted to try it. So at first, it was like really hard because me personally, so I was like, I have like a little bit issues with self-confidence. So like, which showed like when I first started, because like the students were like not being interested in what I was saying because I was like flustered and monotone, and then the parents were like, was like, not hearing me, so they thought I couldn't really say much. But then, so I was thinking like, so that was hard, but then as I kept doing it, it got better. So it helped me with my science communication, and then also my confidence. So that's yeah, so that's gonna be real helpful in my future career, because in anything you do, like in the careers, so it's two key things are like your confidence and effective communication. So that has helped with that. And then particularly, I was thinking for the future, I might want to do like something about with writing and communicating to either the public or a wider range of scientists. So this volunteering experience would definitely help me with that. Then, yeah. And also, besides professionally, it also helped me personally. Like as a researcher, like sometimes you have like self-doubt with like failure in the experiments, or like in your, if you have weak presentations. But then when I do the volunteering, it helps me like reassure my love for science and things like that. So that's why so that's my experience with volunteering. So why I found this really helpful for my growth. So yeah. So that's my experience with that. And then, so one of the things I wish I found out this about earlier, but now that I know about it, it's like really helpful. So that's that.
Yeah, so that's actually something that I thought was really interesting when I read the piece you had written, was when you had said that you sort of went out and looked for these different things and were able to find them online. What motivated you exactly to first start doing that? And something that I was interested in talking about, and we can come back to later a little bit too, is if there's any strategies to help make these things more available to graduate students in general.
It was just mostly because of me thinking about the future, since I was graduating soon. So then also to like look at things outside of research where I can apply my expertise and like scientific knowledge and things like that. So that's how I was thinking about like teaching to the public, since I already teach college students for the PhD program you have to teach. So I was just thinking about that. And then, yeah, so it grew from that. And then actually came to be more than that. So, yeah.
That's great. Thanks. Great. So we can let Elizabeth talk a little bit now. So again, Elizabeth is the acting director of STEM Outreach at the Cooper Union Albert Nurkin School of Engineering, where she helps implement programs such as their K-12 outreach. She's also a member of the leadership team for Brainy, which is the Greater New York chapter of the Society for Neuroscience, which is how I met her. And she's a board member of the Inquiring Minds Institute. She received her PhD in neuroscience from Oregon Health and Sciences University. And I'll let her take it away. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Jessica, I was really thinking about, as you were talking about volunteering and sort of looking for something else to do outside of research. For me, I also started my career, actually. I ended up pivoting from basic science research to science outreach full-time as a result of the volunteer work that I did for Brainy. And it was definitely the opportunity to improve skills, but it was also the opportunity to make friends outside of the lab and meet new people and just sort of deal with the isolation that I was feeling in my research life. I've been volunteering with Brainy now for more than 10 years. I've known Michael for half of that time. So like it definitely has changed my personal and my professional life in ways that I just continue to be really thankful for. The thing that is interesting about Brainy as a science outreach platform is that it's really driven by what the members want to do. So we really have space and mechanisms built in so that people can pursue different types of ideas. Typically what Brainy does is in-person science outreach. So Brain Awareness Week, which is dozens of events around New York City, the World Science Festival. Some of our members visit schools. Some members do others like citywide events where they're reaching out to different groups, or for example, we did a group for senior citizens. So we try to sort of be where people need us, but also where we want to be. One thing that I like about my leadership position with them now is that I've been able to benefit from interacting with the other people on the leadership team and really gain some new knowledge about how to be in a leadership position. But it's also given me a chance to think about how I want to deal with these equity issues. One thing that is important to me is being able to amplify the voices of people who are passionate about science. And so I was excited when after we had to cancel Brain Awareness Week activities, that one of our younger members, Aruj Anasari, who's an undergraduate at Hunter College, said, I'd like to start a brain awareness blog, and I'd like to invite all of our volunteers who would have helped with Brain Awareness Week to share a paper or share their story, as well as the organizations that partner with us. So go check out the Brain Awareness 2020 blog if you can. But what I like about it is that we're hearing so many different voices. Like, to me, that's really central to equity, is being able to hear all the different voices come through wherever you are, however you're thinking about science. That's, to me, that's the part as a scientist that I love the most. You know, sometimes you hear people repeat myths. Sometimes you meet people who didn't have a good experience in school, or didn't ever like a science class, and it's just really fun when they walk past your table on the street and they see a brain and they're like, well, why is there a brain on the street? And they stop, and you can ask them, you know, what drew your attention? Why are you here? And it just opens up a really nice conversation of the types that I wish we could have more throughout the year. And actually, World Science Festival has kind of addressed that issue, bringing more science to the streets. So I really love that. The other part of my work is sort of the institutional perspective. So Cooper Union, if you don't know us, we're a small liberal arts college in the East Village. We were founded with a mission to provide free education for the most motivated, most curious people in New York City to work on social justice issues, and to sort of really be radical in pushing forward how we think about change. And one thing that happened at Cooper Union about 5 years ago was that we moved from a traditional research experience, so where one student would be matched with one mentor in a lab, or maybe two students with a mentor in a lab, the way I used to mentor students when I was a full-time basic science researcher, to actually doing classes. So we would take the research topics out of the lab and bring in groups of students between 16 and 24. The faculty would work with them. The Cooper Union students would be the teaching assistants. And so we were able to just build capacity to have more people involved in science and engineering research. When we do the admissions, we include equity in the model. We are very mindful to take students from a variety of schools. We never place more than 2 students from the same school in a class. We're mindful that we try to take students from different boroughs, students that are at different levels of academic success. So we're not just looking for A students, we're looking for students who really, in their essays, tell us that story about why they're hungry to make change in the world. And then we also really try to engage their families. I think that it's a really powerful experience for all of us to tell somebody what we know and why we know it to be the expert. And so we really try to help students develop this identity, and the whole family develop an identity as sort of being STEM people through that program. And then the other part is I also have the pleasure of sort of training the next generation of science educators, and through that work being able to talk to them about issues of culturally responsive education, of what equity looks like, of what it looks like to honor the diversity in your classroom. And I sort of hope over time that they carry that forward into their workplace and sort of cause systemic change in equity and diversity through our communities. And I think that's like, to me, that's like the upper level of like what public science initiatives can do, is cause or influence cultural changes. You know, my sort of personal goal is that someday one of my students will be a president, and they'll be like, I remember when I worked with Elizabeth at Cooper Union. I'll be like, yes, because I've come to appreciate that as a researcher, I was able to influence and advance ideas, but it was on such a small scale. And for me, like working in public science education is just like really blowing up the influence that you can have on the community around you and on their scientific thinking, provided that you do it in a way that's thoughtful.
That's excellent. And that actually segues in really nicely to something that I wanted to ask. So let's jump right into the discussion part of this. And I'll start with a question, and everyone, if you have questions, please do type them in, because I definitely want to talk about everything. But you were talking about some of your ideas for what's going to happen in the future with these things. And I sort of wanted to ask both of you what you think are the most important current goals for public science initiatives in general, now that we've got a lot of these different programs established. And I was sort of interested both generally what important goals are, but especially what kind of goals are important considering you know, the situation in the world right now with COVID-19, and with really wanting to make sure that people have a science education.
Jessica, do you want to start? Go ahead.
I know it's a big...
But one of the most important things is like the awareness, and then like clearing up like misinformation, because of all the things with the COVID, they get like some information that's wrong. So it's important for like the science communication to like clear that up, something like that. That's one thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Sort of all the myths that are being perpetuated, and even we're seeing them invented. Like in real time, we can see new myths being invented, which is sort of horrifying. You know, really speaks to what Jessica was saying about good science communication, like having a simple message, but not dumbing it down. Maybe, you know, as a scientist, I love science because of how complicated it is. Maybe skip every caveat and nuance that you know about when you're talking about a problem. But also one issue with all of these misconception is that you really have to share the space when you're talking to someone about their misconceptions with sort of the emotional tie that they have to that idea, and how it may be connected to their identity in some way. You know, one that from the neuroscience point of view that comes to mind all the time is the idea that left brain, right brain. Some people have really internalized that as to help explain what type of person they are and how they choose to interact with the world, what their preferences are. And you start telling them it's not true, and they can't process it. So you have to sort of, when somebody who has those misconceptions wants to interact with you, you kind of have to, again, ask them why they're there, and share other information that takes them around to that point.
Yeah, I think that that's been a very valuable thing that I learned from my experiences doing a lot of this volunteering, is a very different way to teach this material by not so much just, you know, saying they're wrong and this is how it actually works, but to make it more of a conversation like that and have a lot more respect for the back and forth a little bit. Do we have any questions from people who are listening? And feel free to ask about any parts of this topic.
I was going to say, I wanted to jump in and just share something that was a recent research article. So in terms of public science initiatives and the need that you were alluding to for everybody to really have STEM literacy, because it's so critical right now in order to make good choices about your health and the health of the people around you. part of that STEM literacy is actually seeing yourself as someone who can use that information, who has some STEM identity. And I think that one thing that came out recently was how much more effective science outreach is when the person that you're engaging gets to do science rather than just hear about science. And that connects to STEM identity, because the 3 parts of STEM identity that have been identified, and this was a research study done by Girl Scouts almost a decade ago now, was that you need to, 1, be able to work on problems that are important to you, that are authentic and current. You need to have role models. Role models can come in all different shapes and sizes, but you need to have the chance to be an expert on a subject. So when you're talking to someone, letting them share their opinion and letting them do the science is an important part of, I think, public science, and also just having equity and everybody really feeling like they own it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I have really fond memories of doing some of the things where we would basically set up games for like the smaller kids to play when they came in. So like, for example, there's a classic experiment with prism goggles that shift your vision over to the left. And one of the things that's interesting is that the motor system and the visual system sort of line up differently. So you're able to learn how to adapt for this, even though the world looks strange to you. And that's sort of a complicated, scientific point. But what we do is we put these goggles on little kids and let them throw beanbags into targets on the ground. And then they can just sort of get an intuitive sense for this issue that we're talking about. And one of the things I always really liked about that is, even if they don't understand all of the details now, it's sort of setting them up so that when they learn it in the future, they're ready to better understand it. So I totally agree. Yeah, interactive activities are excellent. So we have a couple questions. One question is about parent involvement. Elizabeth, you were talking a little bit about having parents involved.
Yeah, so this is a tough issue, parent and family engagement. And every organization and every community kind of solves this problem in different ways, but using common threads. One is, understanding what works for your parents and families. I'm thinking of when I was running family engineering programs. And so at one site, a library, we were doing it from 6 to 7 p.m. at night, because for that community, that's when all the parents who had commuted to work were finally home and could take their children there. And then in another school, they wanted to do their family science event at 3:30 right after school, because that's when the caregivers, especially grandparents, interestingly, were picking the kids up and would take their kids right to the event. So sort of figuring out what works. For the high school students that I work with, we try to really make it a showcase. We really make it something special. I'm not going to say that our final presentations are quite like prom, but maybe that's the closest correlate. Like, it's a big deal. We make it a party. We, ask our students to dress up and make it really a celebration of what they do. And then the whole semester, we are advertising to the families. Ask your student about what their final presentation is going to be. Come to this midway presentation, so that there's multiple ways that they can actually engage with their child and do it. The science on the street, just make an activity that's appealing to kids and adults. Actually, when you were saying before the prism goggles that kids love, adults love it too. So make sure that when you're doing outreach and the kids are engaged, ask the parents if they want to try it too. Many of them will want to try it too.
Yeah, that's always a great moment when they put that on and they realize they're having as much fun as the kids.
Yeah.
Great. So another question that we have is, what age would you recommend it's good to start teaching children about STEM? Like, when is it good to start this?
I think 0.
Yeah, I know that's sort of how I feel too.
And this is partially because of my work with the Inquiring Minds Institute, which sort of looks at, you know, what are the civic actions of a citizen from the ages of 0 to 18. But I saw in the chat another question come up about trust in science. And so I think that trust in understanding how the world works and how the people around you function starts very young. And so as much as we can do as parents, I'm a parent, or as teachers, you know, very early on, show that we respect children's ideas and take them seriously. And I think that's really the foundation for science. And then just expose them to a lot of different things. You know, my girls are like, I don't like that. I'm like, not a problem. We'll just go do something else. So sort of those two things. I don't know, we've all been kids, and Jessica, what do you think? The age that you first remember doing science?
Maybe like starting like 6 or something. Cause you know, like those little science kits that you have. It starts from like grade 3 or something. So those are helpful. And so it's possible as early as possible, since they have like tailored to their level.
Yeah, I agree. And right now, so many organizations are making their curriculum available for free. If you actually have the bandwidth to explore with kids, it's like, it's out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. It would be good to make sure that people know that that's available so that they can all access it. Jessica, I also wanted to ask, you said you did a lot of stuff with World Science Festival. So I remember the one time that I did that, there was actually a lot of kids there because it was very focused on bringing in families with their young kids. Did you have the same experience?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, like those city science events, like with all the parents and children come. And some of them also, some of the parents also, what's it called? So one of them is like teaching like that, what's it called? Angular momentum, right? So we like spin them in a chair and then like, So like some of the children are doing it, but also the parents, some of them too. So, well, that also goes back to the engagement, the parents, but
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to focus on this idea that science doesn't really have to be restricted to any particular age group. It sort of calls back to this viewpoint in general. I think that science is sort of this like restricted area, when in reality, it really could just be accessible to everyone, you know, and it really should be. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. We should have a physicist here because they would just be protesting that science is the explanation for everything.
So here's a good question. I like this one. So what are some strategies specifically to increase trust in science? So I guess not just explaining these different scientific theories, but specifically helping someone who might be a little bit more skeptical in general trust in these ideas.
That's a good question.
Michael, I feel like you should answer that question.
Should I answer that? I don't know. I mean, I think it's a hard question. I haven't thought, like, from my perspective, I often take the point of view of just like, well, let's just show these interesting phenomenon and hopefully eventually, you know, make clear that while we're not trying to explain exactly how everything is working, we're coming up with good explanations that can give an answer to this. And like we were saying before, I think that having the chance for people to basically do the experiments themselves through these activities can be really helpful. So again, when you bring somebody on and you're showing them what, like, for example, we have these experiments with like taste physiology, right? Where we'll like give them different flavored jelly beans and you can like sort of trick around with this. You're letting people actually experience it and get a feeling for it. So when you're explaining the theory, it's not just coming out of nowhere. It's actually describing something that they've actively just done with you. And I think that that's a really good strategy in general. Have any ideas?
I was going to say one other thing that comes to mind as I listen to you talk is also, as we hear people explaining things, if they're saying something that we think is wrong, we need to disagree with them. Like, I think it can be hard as a young scientist or someone who doesn't isn't always feeling confident in their expertise. Like that's been me in a lot of situations, that when people say something that's wrong, I don't always speak up. And so I've been really impressed with news coverage now where they're making an effort to correct things that are being said that are wrong or harmful, which I think is an extreme situation. A lot of times it's just things that are inaccurate or things that we personally disagree with that we let slide a little bit. And I think the public benefits from having experts disagree with themselves in the public, because then they get to hear both sides of an argument and they get to make their own judgment. And hopefully it's the one that's supported by science. But, you know, I think it's an important part of the process that scientists don't often sort of pull the curtain back on, all the arguments that we have before the paper is published.
You know, that's a great point. I remember one of the best sort of aha moments I had just purely within academia was when I realized that a lot of times when you're sitting and listening to a talk, and the talk is something very complex, when you're a newer graduate student, you're afraid to ask any questions because you know, you feel like it's something you're supposed to know. And there was sort of this aha moment I had where I realized that a lot of faculty and higher scientists were asking questions because they did not understand what the person had said and they needed it explained better. And that really helped me understand, yeah, exactly, that it's not this ironclad kind of process. There is a lot of discussion that goes into it.
Yeah, that was the best advice I got for preparing for my thesis defense, was not to worry when the questions started getting really hard. It was because we had reached the edge of knowledge and the people who were asking the questions didn't know the answers either.
Right, exactly.
I was like, okay, good, I'm glad I knew that.
But yeah, in general, like it doesn't have to be, it can be this flexible process for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Great, okay, so there was a question here that I like, that a little bit more of a practical question. So for students who are interested in doing public science, how are ways that faculty are able to help support this for graduate students? So Jessica, you said that you knew someone in your department who was involved in a lot of these programs?
Yeah, there's like, because with BioBus, they give on their website, they give a list of board members, and then I looked at it, and then one of them I knew. So that's how I saw that. But like, yeah. So like, one of the things, so because like in general, we as graduate students, we don't really hear of these science outreach things unless we look for it. So maybe like one thing faculty might do is like just increase the awareness of it. Like this is like an actual thing. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add to that and say, I think two ways sort of came to mind. One is that a lot of the predoctoral grant applications now have a professional development component, a training plan, and it needs to have community service in it. So I think having conversations with a student about how they're going to fulfill that in a very concrete way with timelines and the number of hours you think would be appropriate is really helpful. I think the other way that I've seen faculty support efforts is to do outreach themselves, to be involved, to get their lab members involved. Even if you're only doing it once a year, it really reinforces the idea that it's a valued part of professional activities, so that students would feel comfortable doing it. Even when students are doing it on their own time, sometimes they feel that it's not how they're supposed to be spending their time.
Yeah, so that's part of a much broader topic that I'm very interested in myself. So I sort of alluded to this a little bit earlier. But I like thinking about ways that we can make these public science efforts more of an integral part of the academy, sort of make this something that is an essential part of graduate education, or in other words, like a valid outcome of graduate education is to be working on these kinds of things. Yeah, do you have any ideas on sort of ways to maybe restructure programs at all to make this more of a focus?
Yikes.
Sorry.
How's
Jessica, go ahead.
short, or maybe like in the first year, because like in the first year is like just like in all classes, right? Like not research yet. So maybe like at least have just like at least one day in the class where you just talk about like, okay, sorry. Okay, so we have for my biochem program, for example, for one of the courses is like a research seminar where each week we have like a researcher come in and talk about their research. So maybe you dedicate like one class, just 1 week, one day to just like these public engagement efforts. But yeah, it doesn't have to be like a whole course, but like at least one class just to make the students aware. That is one thought. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's a great way to get people exposed to a lot of different ideas. One person I know who does this in a really deliberate way is Tracy Milner at Cornell Medical College. So she teaches a neuroanatomy class to the graduate students, and at the end of the class, the students lead outreach activities, awareness outreach activities for a local school. So not only do they have to pass all the tests, they have to do a practical application of their knowledge, which I always thought was such an interesting part of the class. And since it comes at the end, it sort of feels like a celebration, like all the hard work pays off. You can now explain how the brain works to a fifth grader and deal with their questions because they have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think that's really excellent. Yeah, it definitely would feel very validating to the student too. That reminds me of at the Futures Initiative, we do a lot of things with classes where we bring together professors to teach classes, but a key part of these courses is that at least one of the class sessions will be public. Basically, people will be able to come into the class and get some experience with that also. So I kind of like that idea of like from a faculty position, making a specific effort to make your information publicly available or to send the students out to do this too. That's actually a really great idea. Great. So let's see, are there any other? So here's a question that I was interested in also. We were talking a lot about these ideas of getting students, younger students interested in a lot of the sciences so that they can find it more accessible as they grow older. Do either of you have any ideas on ways to, in addition to that, make specifically the public science added sort of mindset part of this process so that students who are coming into graduate programs are coming into it thinking about public science as being part of a potential scientific career? Is that anything that is part of any of these programs yet?
That's an interesting question, and it's one that we've often considered to be a top-down problem, and that it has to be the administration and the faculty that are making a decision about how they recruit graduate students and who they admit. And historically, it's favored students who express an interest in traditional research careers. But sort of the power of a deep knowledge of science shouldn't be restricted to academics. That ability to think should spread out over the planet into other areas. And so what's happened is that it sort of becomes a bottoms up, where it's the other graduate students in a program that often tell incoming students about what these other opportunities are. And so it would be nice if more programs told students in advance about the public service opportunities in the same way that you would tell them about other extracurricular activities, rather than sort of wait to the first day orientation to tell them, oh, here's other things you can do. Make it part of how you advertise your program.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Have you been in contact with anyone who is running, who's been running the Illumination Space at CUNY's Advanced Science Research Center? The Illumination Space is an effective space for outreach and efforts to make STEM more inclusive. Are you familiar with this? I haven't actually heard about this.
Yeah, I wish they, I'm familiar with it, and I am cheering for them to get more funding so they can do more programming and be open more hours.
So I actually am unfamiliar with this. What exactly is the Illumination Center?
I forget all the topics that they cover. Like, are you Googling them? But they have a very hands-on approach. They've built the space specifically for public outreach and hands-on exploration in areas that have to do more with technology. I think because kids are really fascinated by technology, adults are really fascinated by technology, using technology to create an interface for people to explore scientific concepts. Although it's cost prohibitive, it certainly can be really effective in doing that. I hear somebody say that they're from there.
We're going to actually try to unmute that person so that they can join in for a second.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about it.
That would be excellent, yeah.
Hi, this is Ori here. So yeah, I'm a professor in the Neuroscience Initiative there. And I would just, after this, I would love to maybe make contact with you and see how we could join the effort, either doing things together at the Illumination space or getting our faculty and students out to the programs that you're supporting.
Sounds great. Yes.
Do you want me to say a little bit about what it is, or?
Yeah, I think
that would be excellent.
Yeah. So the Advanced Science Research Center is it's a pretty unique place in that it's small, but extremely scientifically diverse. So there's 5 initiatives. So just going from the top floor down, it's environmental sciences, and then us, the Neuroscience Initiative, structural biology, photonics, and nanotechnology. And the idea is that it's built to be an interdisciplinary research center. So there's only 4 faculty members on each floor. And the Illumination space is this really, wickedly cool space where we have public school groups and others come in to get introduced to those 5 initiatives, and to try to get them interested in CUNY and get them interested in STEM, but also interested in interdisciplinary approaches to the biggest problems in society. So I'd love to talk to you, later about how we could get involved.
That's very cool. Yeah, I've done work at the ASRC. I did not realize that was happening. That's really cool. I feel like I can bring this up. It's something that I've always thought was very interesting about these efforts, is that there's so many different programs and individuals who are working in these different spaces and different efforts to bring science more public. And they often are not connected across them, which is unfortunate. So I really like the chance for some networking like this. Okay, so we only have about 10 minutes left. So maybe we could go to some final thoughts. I wanted to ask, does anyone have any other questions that they would like to ask now that we talk about?
Michael, I saw somebody ask a question about teaching strategies to create equity. The New York Department of Education recently released a culturally responsive, sustainable education framework. I really encourage people to look at that, because it sort of breaks down what equity looks like at different levels, from very surface to very deep, and offers not guidelines or tips per se, but some places for you to start thinking about how you want to change your practices to meet that goal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I have a specific question that I wanted to ask. For you, Elizabeth, so something that I feel like is somewhat unfortunate is that a lot of people don't, the public science part of it isn't always seen as a primary focus of education or a primary outcome. And I wanted to sort of ask your transition into this. Like, what was your transition into this process, and how do we make it rightfully be seen as like a target goal for people who are going through these kinds of graduate studies?
Right. So, it's always funny for me to answer this question, because I actually spent a decade as a researcher before I transitioned. And it was sort of a moment where I had been doing volunteering with Brain Awareness Week and the BioBus, which I sort of consider one of my homes in New York City, where I had the lab that I was the PI was doing a lot of community outreach and community education and public speaking. And I had this moment where I was like, wait, how do I just skip ahead 35 years in my career to the part where you are, the place where you are now, and do that rather than spend, you know, the 35 years writing R01 grants and doing some of the activities that I don't enjoy as much. And so for me, it was really spending the time to explore different things, like really making a point to try different types of activities and talk to people in different careers. Then feel like I had prepared myself to make the jump, but didn't wait until I felt fully prepared.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Oh, there's a good question that came up.
Yeah, I was just going to read that. So a question. This question just came up, which is, how do we get equity in STEM when we don't have equity in K-12 education? What are some specific strategies that we can use? Elizabeth, do you want to speak?
I think we need to vote. Like, I think that one, we need to tell the politicians and people making decisions that we support change. And we support change in a big and meaningful way. New York City is the largest school district in the country. It's bigger than like New York and Chicago and Miami together. We have the opportunity to innovate, but we don't always go far enough. And I think the other part is, you know, I've been in many situations where I was the white woman walking into a room where I was supposed to bring some expertise to a school where I didn't know anybody, I didn't look like anybody, and really there's no reason for them to believe me. And so it goes back to what I was saying before, is not just share the space, but make space for other people to do science and education in their own way, and then value that. You know, one conversation I've heard among communities of color about the remote learning is that it takes a big pressure off of some kids who weren't having a good experience in a school, that they can learn without the pressures of their identity, always having to monitor their identity. So I think it's time to be willing to take risks and tell other people that we're willing to support them in their efforts.
That's a really interesting point. And it's interesting, it sort of ties back to the unexpected learning from this experience in a lot of different ways. Okay, great. So we have a few minutes left, so maybe we could just go to some final thoughts. If you'd like, I could give each of you just a little bit to say some final thoughts on these issues and sort of wrap it up. Jessica, do you have any final thoughts on this?
I think one thing that I appreciate about this conversation today and being here with you, Michael and Jessica, is sort of the need for us to be really authentic, our authentic selves when we're talking about our experiences. You know, Jessica's story and Michael, the time that we've worked together, I know that people need to see a variety of different types of role models. And so it's really important that we offer that we don't always just try to appear like polished experts. That's one, really hard to maintain, and two, it prevents us from having the impact that we really want to have.
Yeah, I thought that this has been very valuable. I sort of mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, but some of my major interests in putting on an event like this was to help people get in contact and network a little bit and learn more about these different programs. So I'm really excited that there's already been some solid networking happening in this conversation.
So if there are no other questions, I want to thank Elizabeth, Jessica, and Michael for joining us today for this Digital Friday. It's a very important topic. And I want to also welcome you all to RSCP for next week's Digital Friday. It's actually going to be a special edition Digital Friday where we're talking about graduate education for the public good. And today's Digital Friday, in case there was anything that you missed that they had said, we're going to be posting a recording of this Digital Friday on our HASTAC website, and perhaps Michael and his colleagues will help us in writing a recap blog post that will also be posted onto our HASTAC website. So thank you all again for joining us. Thank you, Elizabeth, Michael, and Jessica. And please RSVP for our next Digital Friday special edition happening next week. I already put the link inside of the chat box, but you can also go to our website to see more information about next week's Digital Friday. Thank you all.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.